Hey y'all, my name is Rachel and welcome to You've Got Bible. You've Got Bible is a lifestyle podcast where we'll talk about all things that pertain to life and we'll root it in the Bible. If that's something that you're interested in, it's great that you're tuning in today. Let's go ahead and get started. Today's episode and its title are inspired by the 2006 movie called The Pursuit of Happyness. If you haven't seen this movie, I suggest that you go watch it. I'm sure it's on one or two different streaming services. So the movie is based on the life of a real man named Chris Gardner, who in his life had a considerable amount of hardship and struggle, especially in the earlier years of his life. And he had this struggle as he was trying to pursue his purpose and his happiness. The movie is set in 1981, and Chris Gardner, who's a salesman and who's also a husband and a father to a young son, is selling medical scanners out of his home. So for a while, he's pretty profitable, but soon his sales are fewer and fewer, and he lands in a considerable amount of financial hardship. It goes as far as to spending a night in jail due to unpaid parking tickets and losing his home and even sleeping in bus stations and homeless shelters with his son. In the movie, we see genuine joy from Chris when he's with his son. He works harder, he gets more creative, he develops more strength. Chris then gets offered a 6-month unpaid internship at a stock brokerage firm, and after a series of lows and very few highs, he gets offered a full-time position at the firm. At the end of the movie, he walks out of the firm with his head held high, full of emotion and full of gratitude, and his life at that point had really turned around. I wanted to pose a few questions for you all to think about and to ponder on as we go throughout this episode. What is happiness? How do you achieve it? And where does it come from? Let's anchor our thinking in the Bible as we answer these questions. Today we're reading Ecclesiastes 3. This book was likely narrated by King Solomon, a successful king who was also the son of David. Ecclesiastes gives us a look into King Solomon's questions and thoughts as he mulled over the meaning of life, especially when considering the unpredictable aspects of life and just the humanity of life. Towards the end of the book, he realizes that despite labor, wealth, possessions, or fame, there's no joy apart from God, who is the Lord of life. So again, we're reading Ecclesiastes 3, verses 1 to 13, and I'm reading this chapter from the New Living Translation, and it is written, "For everything there is a season, a time for every activity under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to harvest, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to tear down and a time to build up, a time to cry and a time to laugh, a time to grieve and a time to dance, a time to scatter stones and a time to gather stones, a time to embrace and a time to turn away, a time to search and a time to quit searching, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to mend, a time to be quiet and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace." What do people really get for their hard work? I've seen the burden God has placed on us all. Yet, God has made everything beautiful for its own time. He has planted eternity in the human heart, but even so, people cannot see the whole scope of God's work from beginning to end. So I concluded, there's nothing better than to be happy and enjoy ourselves as long as we can, and people should eat and drink and enjoy the fruits of their labor, for these are the gifts from God. So what is happiness? How do we define what it is? Happiness is a state of being. It's an emotion of joy, contentment, and peace. Happiness is also rooted in a sense of deeper purpose. And while God wants us to be happy, we aren't meant to be happy all the time. Because to be happy doesn't mean you won't experience earthly pain or suffering. As we just read, you can't have one without the other. If we haven't experienced sadness, how will we know joy? If there was no death, would life be something we truly appreciated and treasured? In fact, achieving happiness involves so many different factors. But before we consider the external things that lend to overall joy and happiness, let's focus internally first. God intentionally made us all different with different gifts and assignments in life. God didn't create you to be a copy of someone else. So what brings joy to one person isn't necessarily meant to bring joy to you. And the metric of your happiness should not be determined by what you see others have. Because God created us, He knows what's best for us and what will bring the most joy and purpose out of our lives. And ultimately, we all long for internal completeness and harmony. We want that peace for ourselves, and that peace comes from God and being in God's presence and submitting to Him. You know, when I'm feeling unhappy, I will start to pray and talk to God and turn on a worship song, and that literally shifts the atmosphere that I'm in. In an instant, I go from discontent to deep content just by being in God's presence. And what's really great about that is that it only strengthens my relationship with God. I can always look back and be grateful for my low moments because in them I've learned to seek God. And in that place of praise and worship and humility, God ushers in a new light and strength and joy in me that produces confidence in me that no matter what I'm going through, I am not alone. Also understand that there's only so much in life that you can control. And if you're someone who likes to plan out everything or govern every aspect of your life, submitting to God fully might be a challenge. But believe me, there's nothing that you can do or achieve without God that can surpass what He can do when you walk with Him. And in all our wisdom and power and knowledge, it's important to still seek God so that we can be guided by His views, perspectives, and standards. Instead of holding on to one idea of what your purpose is or what your life should look like, submit your thoughts and plans to God and let God guide you and show you how much more He has for you. You know, everything doesn't have to be perfect for you to begin walking in your purpose. And everything doesn't have to be perfect for you to be happy either. Additionally, if every decision we made was based on what brought us the highest amount of instant satisfaction, we would be creating more of a hindrance for ourselves, especially in the long term. Seeking happiness in temporal things is never lasting because it's dependent on circumstances that are constantly changing. But guess who doesn't change or alter? God. The happiness we experience with God triumphs over anything we could produce on our own. Another point I want to make is that lasting happiness doesn't come from idleness. So start setting goals and tactical objectives for yourself. Ask yourself, what has God placed on your heart and mind to start doing? Have you started it? Are you still stalling if you haven't started it? What are your fears, vulnerabilities, past experiences, insecurities, conflicts, weaknesses? Call them out. Start confronting these things instead of letting them hold you captive. Along with that, our true emotions have a way of surfacing eventually. You may use various coping mechanisms or put on a facade to hide your true feelings, but these emotions often find a way of expressing themselves, whether consciously or unconsciously, which is why it's really essential to acknowledge and address your emotions rather than suppress them. By acknowledging them, it can lead to your better emotional well-being, healthier relationships, and really your overall sense of happiness. You know, there's only so much anything external or outside of yourself can bring you fulfillment when you're not satisfied and at peace with yourself. So once you get yourself in a place of contentment in your pursuit of happiness, you'll be in a much better place to appreciate and feel the way external things can bring you joy. Which is why, again, relying fully on external things can only go so far. We shouldn't be placing our happiness or our identity in the hands of things or people, because life can fluctuate so quickly, and praise from people can alter with the wind, and material goods can grow old. Your identity should truly be rooted in God, who remains consistent, who doesn't waver, and He's the same yesterday, today, and forever. Also written in Ecclesiastes chapter 5, verses 19 to 20, it says, "Moreover, when God gives someone wealth and possessions and the ability to enjoy them, to accept their lot and be happy in their toil, this is a gift of God. They seldom reflect on the days of their life because God keeps them occupied with gladness of heart." What these two verses tell us is that with little or with much, God is still the provider of joy and peace. Also, what's so incredible about the gift of God is He loves us freely because we're His children. You know, we don't have to accomplish anything or do anything to receive His love. It is a free gift. So another way to achieve happiness, along with placing your identity in God, is by making the choice to be more positive in the way that you speak and think. You actually have the authority to take captive every negative or bad thought and to speak against it. I know affirmations are really popular and people talk about them all the time, but that's because it's true, it's real. You can actually uplift yourself with your words, your actions, and the way that you think. If you're looking for a place to start, first begin by telling yourself things that you like about yourself, and then start highlighting and reflecting on the ways that you've had self-improvement. I even encourage you to take it a step further and start listing out what you're grateful for. Do you have family or friends? That's something to be grateful for. Do you have the means to eat or a roof over your head? That's something to be profoundly grateful for. Do you have employment or good health or the ability to move your body? Do you have the ability to speak, to hear? Those are all things to be so grateful for. And when you start listing these things out and speaking them out loud and thinking about them, your attitude and your mindset can completely shift in such a positive way. And know that while you may not always be emotionally happy, you can always find something to be grateful for. And in that gratitude, a feeling of peace and calmness will come, which will ultimately contribute to your overall happiness. So in the movie The Pursuit of Happyness, which we started off the episode chatting about, Chris's happiness was produced from a strenuous labor of willpower and in the faith that things would eventually turn around. What this means is that lasting happiness can often be birthed out of times of considerable discomfort or even pain. And when you seek God, God's strength will produce a supernatural joy and peace in you, regardless of your circumstances or regardless of what you may lack. And everything I've mentioned, I want you to be encouraged that the pursuit of happiness doesn't happen in a day or even in a week. It's a journey. And you may not be where you want to be, but being able to be content and have gratitude in the various places and seasons in your life is so crucial. So often we can continuously seek the next in life without remembering to sit in the present. If there's anything in your life today that you've asked for or prayed for and you now have it, you have a reason to pause and be grateful. So as we circle back on the questions at the beginning of the episode, what's happiness? Where does it come from? How do we achieve it? It is in the pursuit of trusting, following, and building a relationship with God, who has a divinely ordered purpose for your life, that you will start walking in lasting happiness, joy, contentment, and peace. And all other things that God gives you will be an extension of that. To conclude, we'll end with a prayer. I am inviting you to join me in reciting the Serenity Prayer. This prayer was composed by a Protestant theologian, and it reads, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time. Accepting hardship as a pathway to peace, taking, as Jesus did, this sinful world as it is, not as I would have it. Trusting that you will make all things right if I surrender to your will, so that I may be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy with you forever in the next. Amen. Thank you for joining me today in this episode of You've Got Bible. Again, my name is Rachel. As always, if you have a prayer request, you can go on my website, you'vegotbible.com, and submit a form. You can connect with me further on Instagram or TikTok at You've Got Bible. And until next time, I'm sending you an abundance of light and love. Bye, y'all.